Welcome to Kingdomize, the podcast, where we discuss how to see our lives and our world through a kingdom lens, how to infuse kingdom culture into our families, our workplaces, and our cities, as we all participate in the dream of Jesus to see his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Hey, so welcome back to Kingdomize, the podcast. We are still in our Solutionaries series because we love it so much. And this is going to be one of my favorites. We are joined today by our good friend Tim Schindel from Victoria, BC. He is the founder of Leading Influence, a national chaplaincy ministry that ministers to political leaders across the country and houses of parliament. We're going to talk a lot about that. Tim's a good friend. He's an author. Just released a book called Towards a Better Canada. That's going to be great. And he's going to talk about why he is hope-filled for the future. You say Christians shape the future most effectively, not through power or outrage, but through presence, formation, and faithful long-term engagement. I love that. I know
Me
you're
too.
doing that across the country in our House of Parliament, which is amazing. Tim's got his own podcast called Influence Matters. Tim, is there anything you don't do? Like it seems like you do it all. You were a pastor, a business person, a leadership coach. Is there anything you don't do?
I don't eat asparagus.
One of my favorite things you list, Tim, is that, as I've said, you live in Victoria, BC with your wife, Barb. You enjoy cycling, traveling, and what you call road therapy on your Harley. So if we got other bikers here, they're going to be so excited about that. And Ian, I want to just go to you because there's a significant connection between you and Tim and Leading Influence. So let's go there next. Let's go there.
So me and Tim met probably 20 plus years ago. I know we met on a ministry camp for church leaders, but I think we met before that too. That became a significant bonding time, I think, for Tim and myself, in terms of he was wondering what to do with his life. I had suggested we take no more notes and just go and listen to God. And Tim came back and says, my pastoral gift, I think it needs to operate in a totally different dimension than the local church. And so he will explain what that means in a few moments. But I just love what Tim does. I just love the ministry. I love the organization. He's give me the opportunity one time to speak at a prayer breakfast in Victoria. That was an incredible honor. And so I'm really excited to have Tim with us today because I know it's going to be stretching for those of you that are going to listen, but it's going to be inspiring as well.
It will be. Now, Tim, we're glad you're here. As you're listening today, you need to sit up because Tim's he's going to just throw out so many nuggets on the way by. Don't miss any of them about how to be engaged as a solutionary, how to bring real world solutions to real world problems. That's what Christians do. We're not just here to fill our head with information, but we want to talk about how to bring solutions. So Tim, welcome. Tell us about who you are, what you do, and why.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, first, let me say this is the longest I've ever been a part of a conversation and said nothing. So at my core, I'm a career pastor, grew up in a Christian home, went to Bible college fresh out of high school, straight into ministry. That, generally speaking, I had some really good opportunities. It went pretty well. Worked hard, prayed hard, trusted Jesus, and we saw some good things. And then the summer I met Ian, my whole world got turned upside down. Ian, as you were talking about, I feel like I need a different expression for my pastoral gift. I remember that conversation like I was a deer in the headlights with this download in a spiral ring journal about God calling me to set up legislative chaplaincy. And it was, what made it interesting was that I had all of these thoughts kicking around in my head, right? Like sort of different ideas and what about this and what about that, but never had given myself the permission or had never had anyone give me permission to actually take everything that God was saying, put it into one space and kind of see it play out. And so that summer began a journey for us. It took a little bit to get from pastor's camp and what was written in a journal to actually relocating to Victoria. That was probably about an 18-month road, something like that. But in the summer of 2007, we sold our house in Kamloops, put everything we owned and our kids into the back of a U-Haul and drove to Victoria. And I would not recommend anybody else do this unless Jesus calls you to it. But, with sheer blind step of faith and, trusted God. I mean, it's ridiculous. My monthly support, I wasn't very good at raising money in those days, was $2,000 a month. And my rent was $2,500, right? So right out of the gate, there was just this whole thing of I had to trust God. We had to trust God for everything, and that was an exciting journey. I don't want to go back to those days. Thank you very much, but such a great way to build a ministry, because as I reflect back on it, it's this idea that until I could trust God to meet my daily needs, my personal needs, I could never have the faith to believe Him to shift a nation. That right for me, that was kind of how it went. So we kind of skipped over what it is I do, but what we do is we provide excellence in chaplaincy care to Canadian politicians, so spiritual and emotional care, and we're across the board. We are active in 7 provinces across Canada. For those of you that are listening outside of Canada, we have 10 provinces, so we're 70% of the way there. Ottawa is our capital. We have a team of 3 people working in Ottawa, just loving people, sharing Jesus, and really just sharing the love and hope of Jesus, right? Less preach, more presence. And that is turning out to be right across the country such an exciting thing to watch, and just to see what the Bible says in Ephesians, He was able to do exceeding abundantly above all we're able to think or ask or imagine. And Ian, when we started this, it was kind of like, well, maybe I'm going to go to Victoria and I'll start a chaplaincy in Victoria. And I did. But it's like, to see where this is going and what God is doing and the quality of people that we have across the country, it blows my mind. It's just stunning to see what Jesus is up to.
Yeah. So Tim, I'm really interested. So day one, when you realize this is it and you walk into the state capital, like, what's your feelings? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, my day one was absolutely crazy. So my day one, I came as a guest of my local representative who had just been named to cabinet. And I just thought, I'm going there to watch the throne speech. And in Victoria, like, every province does it different, but in Victoria, it's kind of, by February, it's spring here. And it's a real show that, the military comes and they're firing cannons and there's a parade, and it's like a lot of pomp and circumstance. And so I enjoyed a little bit of that, went in, got my seat, and I see my member comes out on the floor, and he's kind of looking around, and I wave at him, and he's like, "You come down." It's like, I don't know what's going on. And so I go down again. Like, I have no sense of protocols. I'm absolutely clueless. But he's, when I meet him, he's standing there with this guy all dressed in black. It's like, well, that's a little weird. And he introduces him. He said, "This is so and so. He's the sergeant at arms. He has a question for you." And my first thought is like, what did I do? Why are you calling the cops on me? Like, I just can't figure out what's going on. So the sergeant at arms says this. He says, "Reverend, the minister we've asked to open our session in prayer today hasn't showed up. We can't reach him. We're unable to confirm him. Would you be willing to open our session in prayer?" And so it was like, absolutely, whatever you want, right? Preach, pray, or die at a moment's notice. And so I go down this hallway, and it is the funniest thing. I've told this story so many times. But we're walking down this hallway. My MLA buddy is beside me, throws his elbow into my ribs and goes, "We know who's really in charge here today, don't we, Tim?" And I'm like a deer in the headlights. The sergeant he's in a hurry because things are happening outside, and his robes are flapping. And I feel like I'm in Harry Potter. Like, it's just the craziest thing. Takes me to the speaker's office. Speaker asks me the same question, directs me to go out on the floor with the sergeant who will show me where to stand and what to do. And honestly, I step out on the floor. This is my very holy moment. I look around and go, holy cow, I'm on the floor of the BC legislature. So undignified of me. But it was like only Jesus could do that. On that day, my friend stood beside me, introduced me to every member of the government caucus, every cabinet minister, every backbencher. "This is Tim. He's from my riding. He's moving to Victoria to set up a chaplaincy to take care of us." And they had no idea what that was. And frankly, I didn't have any idea what that was. Right. But I'm doing what Jesus asks. And so there I am. And it's kind of a crazy story, but that's how we started. So I really when I went in, I had no expectation, like, other than I'm coming to a speech and I'll kind of read the room and see what's going on. But it was just like God just propelled me front and center on that day. And it was absolutely amazing.
Really, really good. So Tim, let's just go a little bit deeper here about what is a legislature? Like, let's just assume I'm a Canadian numpty that doesn't know. So we, as you've already said, you've been very kind for our international audience, in case you're wondering, blah, blah, blah. But talk about the legislature. What's happening there? Who's there?
Sure.
Yeah, just tell us.
Yeah, so every provincial or federal election, we go to the polls, we elect people to represent us. They work in the provincial capital, in the legislative assembly. And they basically, their primary function is to pass laws, debate and pass laws. That's primarily what they're there to do. And so when they're in the building, that's what happens. Their days are set up with meetings and motions. And in the beginning, when I came, I thought, well, I'm going to be there as long as they're there, right? Every day, I'll put in 8 to 10 hours a day. Just if they're there, I'll be there. And I'll tell you that after a while, procedural, like first reading, second reading, third reading, it's worse. It's worse than watching paint dry. Like, to be there for everything. Like, you just really have to love it. But the process is interesting. And there are times, like, in question period, which is only, in BC is 30 minutes a day. In Ottawa, I think it's 45 or an hour a day. But it's that's just theater and drama. Like, they're actually not yelling at each other for 8 or 10 hours a day like that. No one has the emotional energy to do that. That's not what's really happening there.
So it's not like the British Parliament then. It's not like the British Parliament.
Yeah. One day I want to desperately put my foot in the British Parliament, but yeah, I mean, but for the most part, I mean, no one's yelling at anybody. That's the upside. The downside is that for the most part, everybody's working on something else while one person speaks to a room with 12 people in it and no one's paying attention. So it's a weird place, but there's process that we go through to get to bills and laws. So that's what we do. So, I mean, that's what the legislature is, right? What we do in that environment is we build relationships, we show up, care for people, and just walk alongside them. And, certainly our primary focus is with members while they are in the House, while they're serving in office. But there are many who have gone on to other careers, and we just stay in touch with them, right? Because the connection was more than just passing, right?
Yeah. And you talk a lot. We've talked a lot, you and I, Tim, and you talk a lot, which is really important. It's nonpartisan. You don't pick a side. It's very relational. So take a minute and talk about leadership, or leading influence, in the sense of, give us you've got a beautiful, 37-second spiel that really explains exactly what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So we are, first and foremost, a ministry of presence. We're nonpartisan, non-political, non-issue. So we're not beating the drum on any issue, because every day there's an issue, right? But every time we take a stand, or we would take a stand, we would lose half or more of the room. And people in politics have long memories, and they remember the worst of things in some ways, right? Like, they would forget that, that 99 days out of 100 we're there cheering for everybody, but they would remember the day we took a stand.
Yeah.
Right. And we would just be shut out. Right. So we work really hard. We work really hard at connecting with both sides of the room. We work really hard at being seen with members from both sides of the room. So, like, it's not like there's a quota, but it's like, well, if I've had a member, if I've had coffee with somebody from a particular party 3 days in a row, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have coffee with somebody else, a different party, just to kind of keep it balanced. That, he's, sort of that idea that they're with everybody, they're for everybody. And I had a really interesting thing not long after I started. I had lunch with a member, and he brought a guest along with him. And so the guest is asking me what I do and why I'm there. And my friend Nicholas said this. He said, "Tim's here for us, regardless of where we sit in the room. He's a trusted friend. We can count on him."
Wow.
And to me, it's like, to be in that place, because political life, like we've all pastored. The three of us have all pastored at some point along the way. And pastoring isn't always a picnic. Let's put it that way, right? It's not always a picnic, but political life is amplify that by 100. Like, everywhere you go, everybody's got something to say to you. Everyone, right? And COVID particularly, there's a very significant crisis right now around mental health and wellness with politicians, with political leaders, because it's become very difficult for them, like, even to go to the store and buy groceries. Someone will accost them and think nothing of just screaming at them in an aisle, right? Or at a hockey game, or in a restaurant, whatever it might be. It's a terrible, terrible thing that's happened, as we've kind of moved away from civility and respect to this antagonistic, toxic environment. We have to somehow, we got to find a way to turn the clock back, or we will only get people who want to fight.
Yeah.
In politics, we won't get people who want to and are capable of leading.
Yeah, really good. Your story of he's there for us. That guy, when I saw that live when we were there. It was just before COVID. It was March of 2020. Just before COVID, we were with you, and you took us on the tour through the House of Parliament. We sat in the speakers' chambers. It was fantastic. Captain Kindness got a shout out.
Still the best moment in the BC legislature.
I don't talk about Captain Kindness a lot here, but so Captain Kindness was a superhero we had in our church, and Dave and I were there. Dave was speaking at your prayer breakfast.
Yeah.
And we're up in the gallery. Tell the story.
So, well, first of all, Dave spoke at our breakfast, and then he very graciously put on the Captain Kindness costume, and members lined up to have their picture taken with Captain Kindness. It's just absolutely outrageous. So and then
I couldn't believe it when it happened. It was so bizarre.
It was just nuts. It was so, and Dave didn't even like wearing the costume. Frankly, it wasn't his favorite thing to do. Then we go to the house. Breakfast ends at about 8:30. It's 9:00 till everybody's, done. We go over to the house. Dave's back in his civvies, and we're sitting up in the gallery, and it's question period, and things get rowdy. And the speaker, members, may I remind you that Tim, Jason, and Captain Kindness are here today. We must be better. Every so often, the clip comes up, kind of on the anniversary, right? The clip comes up because we uploaded it, and it makes me laugh every time. It was so funny. What a great moment.
It was fantastic. Hey, obviously, we don't want to say any names, but we love telling stories here. Your story is important because you've taken your life, what you did in real life, and you just shift it to another sphere. And it's one of the things we love talking about, because people can understand no matter where they work, whatever sphere they're in, they can be called there to bring the kingdom there. How does God use somebody? Because some people don't even think, well, politics, God's not in politics. Like, talk about how a pastor in ministry shifts that ministry to Parliament and works there. What does that look like? Maybe tell a story or two without names if you can.
Yeah, for sure. So in my case, right, and I absolutely hear you, right? Like I want to be careful. I don't think I'm the finished product by any means, right? But I'm 20 years into the process. So, like some things have happened, some rough edges have been knocked off, those kinds of things. But when I started, my journey began long before I ever knew that's what God was doing. Like when I met Ian, I was either the vice president or the president of my local chamber of commerce. And none of that, like in the real world, like in the natural world, none of that should have ever happened. It just, somebody asked me if I'd consider it, and I said yes. And I didn't think I had a hope of getting elected, but I didn't go to the AGM. I wasn't a member, and they put me on their board. And I'd never been to anything that the Chamber of Commerce had done. And so it was kind of crazy. And so I served as a member, and I showed up, and then a year later they were doing some pruning, and I got called out in the hallway, and I thought, well, I'm next to go, right? And then they asked if I'd sit on the executive, which I did. And, and then, we were a large chamber. I met a whole bunch of politicians, right, in that season. And I just the chamber stuff really gave me life. It gave me energy, because God was using me there. There was fun. There were exciting, different things happening there. And it was a different kind of role, very different role than what I was doing in the church. And I met Ian, and I have this God moment at pastor's camp. And it's like all of a sudden, okay, now I see how these two worlds mesh and what my next steps are. But I would say, for people who are listening, it's like, look at wherever God is calling you, whatever's going on in your world, as we say yes to the simple things. Like God's probably not, in most cases, going to take you. We always talk about Joseph, right? From the prison to the palace. Well, there was a lot of stops in between on that road from the pit to the palace, right? And it's kind of like, and Joseph just proved himself faithful because he just kept saying yes and going through the doors and honoring God in the context that he was in. And I think that if we just kind of get to more of that, right? Rather than it's like, well, I need this big moment where lightning strikes or a Damascus Road experience or whatever it might be. If we could just kind of understand that it's faithfulness in the little things that lead to bigger things or greater platforms and those kinds of things. And then, I want to say this carefully. I think that as we're faithful in the little things, I know this is true, that God trusts us with other things because he can. And so that's kind of where I feel like I'm at. Like I toiled for 9 years by myself in Victoria. So let's be really clear, right? This was not a sudden ascension, right? Like, it was 9 years of figuring out what we were doing, why we were doing it, laying a foundation, and all of those other things before God ever trusted me to go to Toronto and ultimately to Ottawa, and then and trusted me with the team. So it takes time.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, most people are a 10-year overnight success, right?
Right.
Like,
or 20. I mean, I'm a slow learner, so for me it's 20, right?
well, you've already brought it up. So talk about your team, because you have a great team. I've met many of them. Talk about your team and how that progressed and came about. And you say you're in 7 of 10 provinces. Talk a bit about the team and how that worked out.
Well, most of our team, not all, but most of our team are former pastors. That either they've resonated with what we're doing and reached out, or I headhunted them and reached out. So my friend Jason, who succeeded me in Victoria here, we were baseball dads together. We knew each other through baseball. He's pastoring at another church in town. And he was kind of a little bit of a political bent. So he was quite attracted to what we were doing and just asked if he could job shadow. And we did that for about 6 months. And then he said, I'd like to join the team, first part-time and then full-time. So when Jason joined the team, he is an absolute gift of God. But when Jason joined the team, it meant that I could begin to commute to Toronto, which is where, Brian, you and I really got to know each other when I was doing that. So 2 weeks a month, I was in my basement suite, and Ian was there for dinner one night in the basement suite with the low ceiling in Toronto. So did that for a while, and then found somebody in Toronto, handed it off, started to go to Ottawa. Then COVID came and stayed at home. And I thought that COVID would kill us. I really did. And that was a clear and present danger, without a doubt. COVID could have done us in because we're relational, and with COVID, it was hard to have relationships. You couldn't see people. So, but God used COVID to really accelerate what we were doing. Like our growth years we're at 2021. We added in those years, we added Quebec, we added Saskatchewan, we added Manitoba in those years, especially. And so that made it really interesting. Like our Quebec story, how we found our Quebec couple, absolutely amazing. Grant and Anne Claire, pastoring 25 years at Evangel in Quebec City. And I think it would have been the 2019 federal election campaign. I have this idea. I want someone from I want representation on our daily prayer campaign thing that we were doing for the election. I want someone from every province to pray, to lead in prayer. And this is kind of sounds ridiculous, but one of my crazy ideas was I wanted an Inuit person who was born on the tundra to lead us in prayer. And I found an Inuit person up in Tuktoyaktuk who's a pastor. I said, just by chance, as we're getting to know each other, were you born on the tundra? I was. And it's kind of like, okay, this is amazing. I couldn't find anybody for Quebec. Couldn't find anybody. And I'm sitting at my desk, and it's like, God, I'm tapped. I have shaken every tree. I've knocked on every door. I know this is the vision. I need you to send me somebody. 30 seconds later, an email pops up. Turns out it was Anne Claire, pastor's wife. And she said, hey, I saw your thing. So I reached back, and she thinks I'm a bot because it came back so fast. And so finally we get over that. And Anne Claire started our ministry, launched the ministry for us in Quebec City. Tough go. Quebec has a very different relationship. The Quebec government or government in Quebec has a very different relationship with the faith community than we might see, for example, in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Manitoba, that kind of a thing. So much more complicated, but she was able to navigate that, and by just sheer strength and the favor of God, cracked some doors open for us. And it's still unique in Quebec, but we're seeing something happen there. So, it's honestly just by faith that this has happened. So, hey, if you're listening to this today and you live in Manitoba, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, or Newfoundland, and what we're talking about is twigging something for you, you can reach out to me. My email will be on here somewhere. at some point along the way. But reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about what we're doing and how you could be a part of being on our team.
I know that you said at the beginning, like it was a huge step of faith for you to, make that transition. And, you weren't the best, the most profound personal fundraiser, but somehow God came through wonderfully well, not only funding you, but funding the organization. How's it been? Like, is everybody self-funded in the organization?
I talked to my good friend Ian Green about this when we were getting started, and I said, Ian, how do I, because you had led like a multi-staff organization, and you said, the worst part about raising money for everybody is you become the ATM that has to solve everyone's problem. And so we just went the route that if you're going to be on our team, you have to raise your own budget. And it's become easier as time goes on because now we've got 20 years of credibility. And it's like, oh yeah, right. Now it's an easier story. In the beginning, it's like, you want to do what with who, and you want how much of my money, right? Like that was a whole different world, right? So so what I do then is like with our team members is I'm a coach with them, like on the fundraising side. I'm a coach with them. I am mostly an encouragement to them. Some of them are once they have learned how to do it, much better at this than I am. Like exceptional.
Fantastic.
In some cases. So, and again, right, it just takes a massive measure of faith to do this, but the perk is you get to work with the leaders of the nation, and you're able to speak into their lives and sow into their lives and walk along with them and support them on their journey. It's the most interesting thing I've ever done.
Beautiful, mate.
Yeah, really good. Tim, I'd love to hear your thoughts on changing a nation. You made that comment along the way about changing a nation. We talk a lot here about reformation. So the book we released, just Kingdomize it. We talk about rethinking what the kingdom is, then restoring the kingdom, finding what Jesus said about it, and then doing it, but then bringing reform. So rethink, restore, reform, because we think it has to look like something in real time in the real world, right? You talk about this quite a bit in your book, Towards a Better Canada, and I know this is a big part of you. So talk about that. And if you could also talk about, was there a place in time in your life where there was a shift? So we often talk about when people come on and go, I was doing the basic pastoral thing, and then all of a sudden going, hey, I'm not sure that this is working, or I'm not sure we're not at the chamber, or we're not there. Like, so both talk about this as a philosophy, but how it hit you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So when we were living in Kamloops, we were, timing is everything, right? We were there, God is doing this powerful thing down in Brownsville, and Toronto, is happening and stuff. And it was just like our people were hungry. The church was hungry to encounter God in a powerful way. And just, and so we went through probably, 18 months, 2 year, kind of move of God that happened, in our church that was really, really exciting. It was also exhausting, right? It's also exhausting. And it's like, sign me up. I'm all in, but it's kind of like, man, if I could do it over again, I would kind of manage just my own energy in life better. At one point, we kind of laugh about this. We were having babies. We're building our family at that point. And we get to the car on a Sunday night. I'd preached twice. Barb had led worship twice that day, right? And it's like, we're the last ones to leave. And I've got one kid and she's got the other. And I said, where's the baby? She said, well, I thought you had the baby. And the baby was in the bucket under the piano, the baby bucket under the piano, right? He was safe because the alarm system was on, and, but it's just kind of like one of these outcomes of revival is wonderful, but it exhausts you. Revival, renewal, whatever we want to call it, it's like, it's the paddles, right? That when your heart stops, right? The doctors or the paramedics put paddles on you to restart your heart. That's revival, right? It restarts your heart, right? But if they keep putting the paddles to you, eventually they'll kill you, right? So you want just enough juice to get you going again and be excited about life and Jesus, but not so much that it will kill you. And so, and that was kind of began this journey of just like, like it's better for us just to live a life that is fully focused on Jesus and his purposes. I think we lose it. I think we lose it not, we lose passion when we're not living with purpose. And somehow, right, we've made church about come to church, right? And rather than be the church, come to church, right? Be a part of a life group. And those things are all good and important. But it's like what really kind of makes my motor run is I want to live my life with a purpose, a kingdom purpose that transforms the world around me. And that requires, right? Purpose requires process. And so I have to think strategically about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and what I will do, what I'm willing to do and what seems prudent to do in terms of seeing the kingdom advance and what might be a short-term win but a long-term loss. So it's those things that we have to think about. And since we're here and we're talking about it anyway, when I look at the Canadian church today, I cringe a lot because we've adopted this idea that if we shout loudly enough, politicians will do for us what we have been unwilling to do for ourselves in terms of make disciples, right? So politicians will pass, we're going to elect Christian politicians who will pass Christian laws, and that will make us a Christian nation. And it's like, nowhere ever in history has that worked out well. I mean, not even in the Old Testament, right? When God gives them the 10 Commandments, and it should all be really kind of neat and clean. Like even then, they couldn't pull it off. And so I look at it and go, I think that there's just this long-term process, but we need to move away from thinking that shouting louder and being more outrageous or more politically aligned to a particular ideology is going to get us to actual transformation. I think transformation comes absolutely and only through the church. Like politics is never going to do, it can't do what the church is called to do. And we need to come to terms with that, right? And there are, I realize that, again, there's people from all kinds of political spectrums who are listening to this, but we have to get past this idea that electing a particular color of government, blue, red, orange, whatever it might be, is going to solve all of our problems. It's going to make everything better. It's like, no, the problems are the same. And generally speaking, the problems are unsolvable. Right. And it's up to the church to rise. It really is up to the church to rise, both with a prophetic voice, but with a healing presence coming into our communities, right? With strategic leadership and doing that not on our own, like as though we're all that in a bag of chips, right? But it's like that we come in partnership with those who God has placed in authority over us to serve them, to come alongside and help them and support them because they don't have prophetic insight. We have prophetic insight. So that's not in the book, but now I wish it was. No.
It's the look, Tim. I think we're feeling your passion, right? We're absolutely feeling your passion come through. Sense of purpose, sense of destiny. Sure, there's mountains to climb and Goliaths to kill along the way, but we feel the sense of joy in actually what you're doing, which actually should be right. Absolutely,
yeah.
You should be full of joy. And I think I said at the beginning that you made the transition from pastoring a local church to pastoring politicians, and that's obviously so. I mean, would you, for people who are listening right now who may have a church-based gift, right? They only see the application within a local church, but their gifts could take them over the wall. Can you give any advice for people who may be listening?
It's a great observation. Really good question. I think that, our greatest opportunities, my friend George Johnson, who I think, Ian, you would know, who's now since passed, George said this to me one day. It stuck with me. Your greatest opportunity is in the harvest, right? In those people who are outside of the local church. And I would say, it doesn't matter what your gift is, right? In the church, like it's like, well, I have, the gift of mercy. Oh, our world needs mercy. I have the gift of encouragement. Our world needs encouragement. I have the gift of whatever it might be, right? Those gifts are so applicable and there is just this desperate need for the spiritual gifts that God has given us and the motivational gifts that God has given us to be expressed in the world around us, whether it's just in your workplace, whether it's in volunteer work in your community, like, whether it's you're on a parent advisory committee, or you're serving on a hospital board, or you run for school board or city council, town council, whatever it is. There are endless opportunities for us just to show up and serve. And then coming right, just to make it really, really simple, you can't ever go wrong with just being kind. You just can't ever go wrong with being a great neighbor, right? Like if I would say anything, in the last number of years, it's like, I love what I get to do, and I want to do that well. But when I'm at home, I want to be the best neighbor on my street. Like, that's just kind of right.
Love that. Love that.
It just brings expression to what I'm doing nationally to my neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Love that, Tim. No, that's great. That's great advice. Because again, we know that people expecting the big light to come on, the big voice from heaven, and it's just been who Jesus made us exactly where we are. And I absolutely love what you're sharing there. That's awesome. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah, really good. I'm going to throw out two things that you've said, Tim, and let you respond to them, just so we can clarify. The one's for you to clarify what you meant by it. The next one, I'll let you play with it. So you said, and I quoted you at the beginning of the show here, Christians shape the future most effectively, not through power or outrage, but through presence, formation, faithful long-term engagement. Now, I know what faithful long-term engagement is. I know it in my head. We don't do it well because we want instant gratification. But talk about presence and formation, because that will help the people that aren't called to church ministry, but maybe it's to politics, or maybe it's to business, or maybe it's to fill in the blank education, right? What does presence and formation look like to you?
I think that it's interesting, that Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount talks about salt. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Both of those examples have an immediate impact, but they also have a long-term impact. Right? If I put salt on my meat, right, it tastes better. If I turn on a light in a dark room, it changes the environment. Right? And it's good to have a little bit of salt on my meat, or it's good to throw a light on. But at the end of the day, I need light to survive in the darkness. Right? I need salt to either preserve my food or make it taste better, whatever the case might be. I need those things to happen. And so I don't think it's an accident that Jesus chose those two examples. Long-term commitment, everything happens over the long term, right? And it's like, again, right, it's like we look to politics because for us, it's like, here's the quick and easy fix. We're going to vote these people out. We're going to vote these people in, and Jesus is going to be pleased. I joke about this, but I'm preaching about this right now. So we lose our perspective, right? And frankly, I feel like the church loses its mind at times, right? And so on election night in April of last year, when the Liberals won, right, the election that everybody thought the Conservatives were going to win, somebody writes on my wall, Ichabod, right? Because the Liberals have won. It's Ichabod. The glory has departed, and it's like, wow. I think Jesus is bigger than that. I think that he has more grace than that. And who's to say that, the current leadership isn't God's plan for the country, right? It's a little early on election night to be making such an outrageous statement. But we have these kind of crazy ideas that it can only be one way. And it shows our immaturity and it shows our impatience. I think at the end of the day, we just show up and we keep showing up and we keep loving, we keep serving, we keep honoring, we keep inspiring, we keep equipping, we keep resourcing. And over the long term, the tide and I'm not going to say the tide can turn, because I'm absolutely confident, right? Jesus said, I'll build my church, the gates of hell will not overcome it. And as we build the kingdom, as we partner with him in building the kingdom and walking along with him, inevitably, undoubtedly, without any uncertainty in my mind, I'll say, the tide will turn.
Yeah.
The tide will turn.
Ian's already said this, but you sound really optimistic. You sound really hopeful. What is going on with you? Like, shouldn't you be a mess hanging around so many politicians? Like, I could just hear people thinking, it's like, I would get such life from it. Like, what you do is so amazing. But why are you so optimistic? Like, what the heck is going on, Tim? What's going on?
Well, okay. Full disclosure, there are days when I leave question period in Ottawa and it's like, good God, what did you do this to me for? Why? especially a couple of years ago when question period for a full week was about how much the price of celery had increased in different ridings across the country. And it's like, I didn't sign up for this, but I'm not there for that hour a day, right? Like I'm there for the bigger picture. But I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I'm hopeful. I am hopeful today for multiple reasons. Number one, the generation that follows us, the young men and women who follow us, I see something in them that I don't know that I had when I was at their stage in life. And I will say that particularly of the young men and women who serve on Parliament Hill and serve as staffers all across this country, Christian young men and women who are sold out to the kingdom. And they get that they are, right now, they are the bearer of binders. They are the makers of appointments. They are the, speech writers in the back rooms. They are all of those things, but they get that they are a part of something much bigger than they are. Yep, they have a partisan side, everything else, but they understand that God has called them and placed them there. They have a clarity around that is much bigger than what I would have had at that stage of life, number one. Number two, there are more Christians in office in Canada today than we've probably seen in the last 25 years.
Wow.
At a provincial federal level. And that brings encouragement to me too, right? Because now there are people who are very old school, right? Who are people of faith. They're very old school and they want to stand up and preach all the time. And then there are others who walk around and they're salt and light. And they're not hiding their faith. They're not hiding their light, but they are playing the game differently. They're playing the game more strategically, more intentionally. And it's that wise as serpents, harmless as doves thing, right? Like everybody, like the masses, we want Christians to stand up, members to stand up and vote against their caucus or tell everybody off, and righteous indignation, kick over some tables, whatever it might be. And it's like, that's not how you win this game. That's not how you win this game. You win this game by showing up, by choosing your words carefully, by building strategic alliances and relationships. That's how you win the game.
Yeah, really good.
So I'm jacked. I'm pretty pumped about it all.
Yeah, somebody really smart that I know said this, or asked this rather, what would it look like if Christians stopped trying to win and focused instead on being faithful? That was you, Tim. That was you. So
wow.
So that
I like it when I say smart stuff.
That whole faithfulness saying, that long obedience in the same direction, the salt and light, they see your good works, glorify your Father in heaven. That is the long game. That is the strategy. God gives you wisdom, and it doesn't mean you're not a prophetic voice, like you mentioned on the way by, but the prophecy comes out differently in a relational
context. It does,
right? It's really good.
Yeah, no, that actually, if I could just pick up on that for a second. I remember after we moved back to Victoria, I had pastored here at one point, moved back to Victoria, talking with my pastor one day, and I said, I use spiritual gifts in my work way more than I ever did in the church. Oh, that's impossible, right? Because he's got this churchy grit. I said, no. I prophesy to people every day. I said, they don't always know that I'm prophesying because my eyes aren't rolled back, my hair's not straight back, and my hands aren't in the air, right? It's like, it doesn't look like it sometimes does in the church, but I said, I prophesy over people every day and I see fruit coming out of it. It's amazing.
It's interesting because Tim, you and I have a very similar background with the Pensacola, Toronto revival.
Yeah, all of that.
So for my revival friends, I just say, hey, listen, Reformation is just sustained revival. Stop with the paddles all the time, as you say, and let's just keep this thing moving, can we? Let's take what Holy Spirit's doing and put it everywhere. So last thought, Tim, this has been so good, but last thoughts, anything you haven't said you want to, and then let's get to how people can reach you. It's going to be on
for sure
as well, but let us know.
Yeah. I say this really carefully because it sounds so presumptuous, but I feel like God is calling me into this thought leadership space, right? That like we've got a lot of Christian activists. I don't know that we have a lot of people who are, engaged in, and I'll say, the game, like on the hill, active, connected, present there. We don't have a lot of people who are in that situation who are actually kind of giving thoughtful, sometimes counterpoint wisdom into kind of some of the current situations that are happening in the country. So I've got a blog called Influence Matters. You can find it off the Leading Influence website. Just go on About and look for Tim's blog. And that's there. And so the timing might not work for this, but I just dropped basically an op-ed piece on Bill C9 and just kind of a different perspective on how we could be approaching this that would, I think, create more wins for us than just another series of losses. So there's that. Do you want to talk about the book now?
Yeah,
we can talk about the book.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I have been working on this book forever. It feels like forever. It's called Towards a Better Canada. And I just believe that we can build bridges of faith, hope, and influence all across our nation. And it doesn't have to be like, as much as I respect Ian and Brian, we don't need the Ians and the Brians alone. There are too many bridges to be built to count on just the three of us to build them. I am convinced of this. Anybody can build a bridge. You can build a bridge in your neighborhood just by the way you live your life and conduct yourself and carry on. And I've so this is the book. I've just dropped the study guide to go along with it that you can use. You can do it independently. You can do it, bring a group of people together. And the grand vision is to launch 1,000 bridge building groups across the country.
Fantastic.
And it's just because again, right? I think it's just as the church rises in a proactive way, that we can move away from this protest culture and into a pioneer building culture. I think we can. That's where the kingdom happens, right? That's where the kingdom happens. That's where we see Jesus at work. So I want to be a part of what Jesus is doing.
So Towards Better Canada is the name of the book.
Yeah, towardsbettercanada.com. You can buy the book there or on Amazon. Or, and then leadinginfluence.com is where we talk about the chaplaincy stuff, and love to have people take a look either way. You can get me at tim@leadinginfluence.com. It's probably the best way to get me. And we're just happy to engage with anybody on what I'm doing.
Excellent. Well, Tim, you are a champion in Canada. I'm glad to call you friend. Amazing. Your story is amazing. I'm sure you've blessed many, many people today as they've listened. So thank you for your time. Ian, over to you. Anything you want to say in closing, my friend?
Yes, so refreshing. So I think people who listen to this podcast know that we're absolutely not against the church, but we want to see the church released into action.
Exactly.
And what Tim is doing is the church in action, actually in society, making a difference, helping people, pastoring, caring, loving people. And so what I've loved about today is not an either or. It's the same thing with a different direction. And so I love the thought that Tim brought, where he says, if you got a gift of encouragement or giving or generosity or whatever, you don't have to leave it inside the doors of the church. You can let it leap out. You can come into your neighborhood with it. You can come into the supermarket with it. And I just love the whole practical nature of what Tim is doing. And I know there are hundreds of politicians right across Canada that impacted and helped by leading influence, and they don't even know who they are.
Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate the encouragement and just the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, really good to have you, Tim. Ian, thank you. And thanks for listening today to Kingdomize the podcast, our Solutionary series. We talk about it under the banner of Matthew 28, discipling nations. And man, if we've ever talked about it in a good way, it's been today talking about discipling nations through the sphere of politics. So excellent. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week again on Kingdomize the podcast.
Thanks for joining us today on Kingdomize the podcast. Let's keep the discussion going throughout the week on our socials or on our website, kingdomizeglobal.com. Contact us today to see how we can walk together to see more of God's kingdom in your city as it is in heaven.